Right, so hello and welcome back to Books and Things, and welcome to another video, and welcome back to my TBR Advent Calendar. My TBR Advent Calendar, my Vlogmas this year, is very kindly sponsored by serious readers who make wonderful reading lights like this one, which I use like this when I'm reading, but I'm currently using to slightly improve the lighting of this video because it's quite late in the evening when I'm filming this, and a bit more light from every angle helps. So I will leave some links down below to where you can find out more about serious readers, including the offer code I have on at the moment, and I'll also leave the introduction video to this TBR Advent Calendar below. Although I'm slightly fudging things at the end of this TBR Advent Calendar. I've really enjoyed doing it so far, and I have read some very great short books from my TBR, but the week before Christmas is just very, very busy. And my plan had been to get ahead and pre-read and pre-film some of the books and videos for the last few days, and I have just not had time to do that because work has been busier in December than I anticipated, which means that I am a bit behind, and I don't know how much I'm going to have time to read over the next few days, and indeed how much time I've had over the last couple of days. So I missed yesterday's video because I just didn't have time to film, but I'm going to do a double bill for you today because I have finished 2 audiobooks over today and yesterday while tidying and wrapping presents and doing lots of Christmassy preparation stuff. So I have had a busy weekend, but I did manage to finish 2 audiobooks, which I really, really enjoyed, which I'll tell you about in a second. And then I think over the next couple of days, I might have time to pick something short off my TBR for the TBR Advent Calendar 1 or 2 days, but I think maybe one day I may instead focus on finishing some stuff that I've already been reading so far in December, and so I'll have a book to talk about, but it won't be a book I've read in one day, just because there's a few books I've been reading for ages that I would quite like to finish off tomorrow or Tuesday if I can, but I will see how I go, and I will keep you posted. But yes, the 2 audiobooks I have read. One of them was The Grey King by Susan Cooper, which I really enjoyed. So this is a children's classic from probably the 80s, I guess. I can't remember which books in the series are from when. From 1975, I was a few years out. But The Grey King is the 4th book in the Dark is Rising series. So I've read the previous 3 over the last year and a bit. So the first book is Over Sea Under Stone. The second book is The Dark is Rising. The third one is The Green Witch. And the 4th one is The Grey King. Really can't actually say that much about the book because it's the 4th one in the series. But the books in the series are relatively standalone stories in themselves, though the characters and the sort of like threat carries across the books. So in the very first book, we meet sort of 3 children who end up getting involved in some magical battle between the light and the dark, and between good and evil, that is in some ways sort of caught up with like British legend and mythology and folklore. And then in the second book, we meet a different character. In the third book, all the characters kind of come together, and then in the 4th book we're back with the character from the second book, Will, who I really, really like. In this book we follow him to Wales, and magical things occur. In general, I really enjoyed it. I like Susan Cooper's writing a lot, and I think that The Grey King was a really interesting story. Well done. I really like Will as a character, as I said. I do think there are a couple of things in it that are quite like of its time, like it is a book from the 70s, and there's a character in it who has albinism, and I think some of the discrimination he faces is like quite well drawn, and he is a likable, like good character, but he's also got a slightly like magical ethereal thing about him, which is sort of like tied up with him being albino, which feels a bit off, but you know, it's a book from the 70s. I'm not hugely surprised by that. Anyway, generally I enjoyed The Grey King, and I'm really enjoying that series so far. And then the other audiobook I've listened to is The Trumpet Major by Thomas Hardy, for General Librarians Thomas Hardy read along, which I really enjoyed a lot. I love Thomas Hardy, and it's been really lovely rereading them in publication order. There were a few Thomas Hardys that I'd read twice before or 3 times before, but the majority of Thomas Hardy's work I'd only read once before, so it's really nice to reread them. The Trumpet Major was one I'd only read once before, and I just think it's a really good story. It's a historical novel, so it's set in the Regency period rather than in the Victorian period, at a time when the threat of invasion from France during the Napoleonic Wars is really at its height, and the people on the Wessex coast in the novel just are genuinely expecting the invasion of Napoleon and his army at any moment. And I think that fear is so well drawn and really, really interesting, and is a sort of like standout element of the Trumpet Major that makes it a really fascinating read. I think the romantic relationships and the sort of love square is interesting, though there are probably love squares I like in other Thomas Hardy novels more. So we have a young woman, Anne, and there are 3 men who are interested in her, or who she has sort of romantic potential with, 2 of whom are brothers, and one of whom is unrelated, and he, Festus, is just like the worst. I can't stand Festus. He makes my skin crawl, but he's also like such a completely believable character. The kind of person where you're like, oh yes, there are still plenty of people like that in this day and age too. And yeah, I think it's a really wonderful novel. I love Thomas Hardy so much, and it's been, lovely rereading Thomas Hardy over the last few months, and it'll be lovely reading more Thomas Hardy next year. I'm really enjoying listening to Thomas Hardy on audiobook as well, which I hadn't done much of before. I think I had reread, The Mayor of Casterbridge and the Woodlanders on audiobook, but otherwise all my Thomas Hardy reading had been physically, and I actually really like Thomas Hardy on audiobook. I think his sort of atmospheric writing works very well for me on audiobook. So yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed The Trumpet Major. So there we go, 2 books, though 2 audiobooks, and not from my physical TBR, but there we go. I still have 2 books for you today, even if compressed into 1 video, and we'll see what happens over the next few days. Like I said, I might not have time to do that much reading, but I'll do my best. So yeah, that's all for now. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll be back tomorrow, hopefully, with another bookish video.